Shepard, very, very much. You are watching this video coming to us from WABC in New York. The New York Post is reporting now that at least 2 people have been fatally shot in lower Manhattan by a gunman firing from his truck. We don't know what precipitated the incident. Some are saying an accident between 2 vehicles, but the gunman, now in police custody, shot at least 6 people at West Street and Chambers Street. This is downtown, not too far from the old World Trade Center, what is now known as the Freedom Tower. All of this near Stuyvesant High School. It happened around 45 minutes ago, or all of this went down about 45 minutes ago. A witness described in the New York Post saying this: what happened was there was a car crash. The driver came out of one of the cars. He had 2 guns. He was running around Chambers Street, I should stress here. Somebody started to chase him. There were multiple reports of people hearing multiple gunshots. This witness said in the vicinity of 4 to 6 gunshots. A lot of people started running. There was some evidence of at least one person lying motionless on the street. Reports that 2 to 3 others were in a similar predicament. Video of the scene, of course, shows some bedlam and confusion there. The shooter, again, is in custody. There's so much we don't know. What we do know is this rings some eerie, familiar scenes that have been played out in other cities across the globe. No one is calling this terror at this point. As Shepard also pointed out, we had a very similar incident to this in New York that involved just a deranged driver. That was a few months back. In the meantime, Rick Leventhal with what he is hearing right now in New York. Hey, Rick.
Well, Neil, we're getting some information from law enforcement. This is preliminary information from sources. We're seeing other information that's popping up from local news organizations. And as you're reporting, one local news organization is reporting that there were 6 people shot after this suspect got out of his vehicle at Chambers and West Street in lower Manhattan. Police sources are telling me this may have begun a bit further north at Houston Street along the West Side Highway, when the suspect may have driven onto the bike lane and driven south on the bike lane and may have struck multiple pedestrians and or people on bicycles before stopping at Chambers Street, where there may have been shots fired. And again, this is all preliminary, but I've been told by more than one law enforcement source that they believe there are multiple fatalities in this incident. There are multiple police agencies on scene in lower Manhattan. They have frozen the zone there down near One World Trade and the World Trade Center and Ground Zero. They've frozen that area, in part because there is, they believe, a suspicious package on that truck. They want the bomb squad to check it out and make sure it's not an explosive device on that suspect pickup truck, which, as you're reporting, witnesses have said struck multiple people. Someone got out of the vehicle and may have opened fire with a gun. We're still waiting for confirmation from law enforcement, but you can see there are plenty of officers down there in lower Manhattan. They are trying to keep people away from the scene while they tend to the injured victims and try to process what actually happened there. But we do know multiple people have gone to hospitals. There are, again, many police in that area after an incident that involved this pickup truck with multiple injuries and perhaps, Neil, multiple fatalities.
So it would appear that first he drove onto this bike path, again, near the World Trade Center, right? And then after that, brandished a gun. So it does not appear that getting onto the bike path was an accident.
The initial report I got from a law enforcement source was that they believe this truck may have driven onto the bike lane at Houston Street and driven south to Chambers, and that's where the truck came to rest. And there may have been a shooting incident, and where that suspect was then taken into custody in the vicinity of Chambers Street and West Street in lower Manhattan. Again, the bomb squad is on scene, and there are multiple victims and perhaps multiple fatalities.
All right. Rick, thank you very, very much. Again, you could see by that strip of lawn and park, by a Bloomberg Finance park that was built not that many years ago. This is along the West Side Highway. Frequently probably connects you north and south in Manhattan. This is not too far from the old World Trade Center. And, of course, what is now the Freedom Tower and downtown New York, that is now a booming area beyond just the financial district. Buck Sexton is the former NYPD intelligence officer. And Buck, no one is calling this terror. No one is jumping to any early conclusions on this, but it certainly does look like this guy had the intent to hurt people, jumping onto the bike path and then brandishing a gun coming out when his vehicle was stalled. What do you make of this?
Well, Neil, at this early stage, when you have reports that are both unverified and conflicting, that the best that you can do to try and get an early sense of what we're dealing with here is look at the probabilities and similarities that are involved. By probabilities, I mean the likelihood that an individual got onto this bike path and was running people over, which has been reported so far, and then on top of that, that there was gunfire, that he was shooting at random civilians, and that this was anything other than an intentional attack. I think we all know that this was an attack. So then you go beyond that to look at similarities, and once you're talking about a vehicle and follow-on gunfire, if in fact that's the case, it's not confirmed yet that both of those things happened in that sequence, but once you're talking about a vehicle attack and gunfire, we start to look at similar attacks that have occurred in Europe that were terrorist incidents, but this is, as has been said, too early to quantify and specify as a terrorist incident per se. It certainly is a multiple casualty incident at this point from what we know, and we're going to be looking more closely at reports of what possible motive was here, who the suspect is. I know the suspect is in custody, and it's just a process of trying to sift through the rapid diffusal of information and try and get the best sense possible of what this is right now. But it certainly is an attack. It's a terrible scene in my hometown here in Lower Manhattan. It's bringing back rough memories, I know, for a lot of people in this city. And we're just going to have to keep our eyes on this and make sure we understand the reports and the veracity of them as they come in.
We're also understanding now, and this is via our desk, that the FBI is involved now and on the scene. What does that tell you?
It tells me that they're taking very seriously the possibility that this is a terrorist incident. I've seen reports that this was a New York City cab driver. That's not yet verified. If that was in fact the case, there'll be a lot of information they can pull right away on who this individual is. So it's not going to be hard to ID this person. They will know, and they'll be able to start the immediate investigation of both the activities of that person from today, and then going back in time, looking at their digital footprint, their phone, their cell phone, their computer, everything that they have been up to in recent days, weeks, and months. This all unfolds very rapidly. I mean, right now, they're also concerned about the possibility of either co-conspirators out there or follow-on attacks. That's just standard operating procedure after an incident like this. There's no reason to believe right now that anyone's in imminent danger. There's a continuing threat. But when you are looking at a multiple casualty attack like this in New York City, which from when I was at the NYPD, I can tell you, I mean, this is still the crown jewel of terrorist targets, is New York City. The moment you're looking at an incident like this, people have to take very seriously the possibility that there are either copycat or follow-on attacks. So the FBI's involvement also deals with that. But right now, it's really, Neil, about finding what the motive is here, making sure that the casualties are tended to and that we get as much help to them as possible, and then that we understand what the actual facts of this case are, and the information gets out quickly to the public, because that's an important part of keeping everybody safe downtown and preventing any kind of panic from spreading, which an incident like this could create.
Well, Buck, if you don't mind staying there, I just want to bring people up to speed. If you've just tuned in here, the FBI is now responding to a scene in downtown New York, not that far from the Freedom Tower, the World Trade Center, and a community getting ready for its annual big event, a Halloween parade hours away. But the West Side Highway, a busy thoroughfare that connects north and south, the lower to the upper part of Manhattan, has been essentially shut down south of about 20th Street, we're told, a little bit further than I earlier thought. And reported. What we do know right now, and this is confirmed by a variety of sources, that at least 2 people now have been fatally shot, maybe as many as 6 others also shot, in what appeared to be a deliberate act on the part of one individual to storm onto a bike pathway, and once stymied there, began shooting people when he got out. Now, he has been apprehended. He is in custody. We don't know of any others involved. The vehicle itself, they're being very careful around. They don't know it's been booby-trapped. What we can tell you is no one is calling this a terrorist incident. We do know that the New York Governor Cuomo is en route to the area, that the New York mayor has also been alerted to developments now in downtown New York, of course, an area very familiar with terror and concerned about it. So you can understand officials' leeriness labeling this at this early time. We should also point out that what oftentimes looks like terror could just be a mad gunman person or just a lunatic. And remember, it was back in May, early this year, around Times Square, an 18-year-old woman was killed. 22 people were injured when a speeding car plowed into pedestrians in Times Square. That was not a terrorist incident. It was just deemed to be a guy who just snapped. Again, it doesn't really matter if a loved one that you know was hit and possibly killed in an attack like this. The source of it isn't as important as just the fact you've lost a loved one or someone close to you is badly injured. They're really not interested at this point in determining the source of this as much as whether there could be other players at hand. Pat Brosnan is a former NYPD detective. He joins us on the phone. They're rightly being careful, Pat, as I said, to call this anything but just an incident. But with the FBI involved, it's sort of upped the ante here, hasn't it?
Well, I'll tell you, Neil, I kind of part company with that theory, particularly by your earlier guest. It's certainly not too early for me to call this a terrorist act, given the 6 disparate factors that are confirmed, as far as we know, given the known facts. First of all, it's a deliberate act. He turned that vehicle. He made a hard right-hand turn. I know exactly where he went on the Houston Street and traveled at least 10 and as many as 14 blocks, according to what we're developing in the command center here. We're getting, thousands of different streams of social media intel that we're parsing through. So we've got to start with a deliberate fact. These are the known deliberate facts. The car was
I should stress, Pat, I should stress again, the FBI is confirming us that they are too soon to call this a terrorist act. I just want to be very, very cautious here. They are not calling it. But go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
No, and Neil, listen, we've gone down this path way too many times. The fact is, it is premature to speculate with precision, but the reality is, when you take the cumulative factor of 6 disparate facts, the car is a weapon. The deliberateness of traveling 10 to 14 blocks on a bicycle pathway, which we all know like the back of our hand. The third factor is heavily armed, not just a handgun, but 2 automatic weapons. And how's this for symbolism? It's Halloween, and it's within striking distance of the Freedom Tower. I got to tell you, it sticks an ice pick of fear into me personally, and it's very, very disturbing.
So, Pat, the FBI arrives on the scene working with local, New York City police. How do they handle who's investigating what here?
Well, at this early juncture, they're probably splitting the command structure on it. The FBI is coming in because of the very likelihood that it's a federal terrorist act, which would fall under their jurisdiction. Plus, you have somewhere between 2 fatalities and 6 other injuries, some by gunshots, some by vehicles, based on early reports. So the local detective squads and the local chief of detectives actually would be responsible for that through the NYPD. So they'll be sharing responsibility for the command and control of the site. But I think the fact that the FBI leaped onto the scene, first of all, they're right around the corner, New York office, but nonetheless, they're on the scene, I think certainly supports the operating premise that this is being viewed as a likely terrorist attack.
All right. If you could just stay there. I do want to alert people who are just tuning in here that a gunman emerged from what appeared to be a crashed Home Depot truck, then started opening fire, apparently on 4 bike riders. He jumped onto what was a bike lane. These are very popular in Manhattan, particularly in downtown, where they have, they rule the streets. He jumped onto the bike lanes, plowed through 4 people, we're told, one of them fatally, then got out and started shooting people. On that, Pat, it certainly is a deliberate act, whether it was inspired by other groups or whatever. It was certainly a deliberate act. The governor, we're told, arriving on scene right now, the mayor as well, or close by. But just your thoughts on some of that information that's coming out in bits right now.
But as the sixth factor of the known facts is this Home Depot truck. This is all chilling and very eerily reminiscent of a number of other attacks that have been both on your show and we've discussed on a number of different occasions. You have to look at the two weapons, 2 automatic weapons, extremely unusual, opening fire, the deliberate nature of the drive 14 blocks on that bicycle path. It's really scary stuff. I think this is going to be a bad one when the smoke and dust settles.
All right. Howard Safer, the former New York City police commissioner. Howard, one of the things that comes up is the sequence of events, how quickly the police responded, and thank God they did. But this is coming separately from the New York Daily News, reporting one witness that I thought it was a Halloween prank or something. I saw the gun running in a circle and realized it was very, very serious. This assuming after the shooter jumped out of that truck. What does all this tell you? It's early goings on. It seems to be the police are saying one man in custody. It appears to be just this one guy, but it's too soon to say that without a doubt, right?
It is too soon to say it, Neil, but, it sounds like a individual, probably, we don't have any indication yet of if he was shouting anything, relative to terrorism, but if so, it sounds like an individual self-radicalized, and it's unfortunate. As we're successful overseas with ISIS and terrorism, this becomes an easy target. You can't put bollards on every path and on every street, and that's the unfortunate part.
All right, Commissioner, thank you very, very much. Rick Leventhal has an update on what are you finding out, Rick?
Neil, I've just spoken with a high-ranking law enforcement source who has responded to this scene, and he is telling me that a number of things, that the perp in this incident was shot twice by police responding to the scene. The suspect is not dead, but he was shot twice, and that the suspect may have gotten on the bike path much further north in the 40s on the West Side Highway, may have hit people up there or been on the bike path in the 40s, gotten off onto the West Side Highway, and then got back onto the bike path further down, where that suspect then apparently hit people on the bike path with that rented Home Depot truck. People on bicycles or perhaps pedestrians struck numerous people before apparently another driver, a Good Samaritan in a school bus, saw what was happening and cut this guy off. And you see the truck there, it's damaged. That's apparently because someone in a school bus, intentionally, an empty school bus, intentionally drove and hit this guy to stop him from hitting anyone else. That's when the guy got out of his vehicle, and the law enforcement source is telling me he had what appeared to be a handgun or some kind of weapon in his hand, but it may not have been a real gun, and this suspect may not have fired any shots at all. And again, the police are still investigating this, trying to put this together, but when police saw what appeared to be a gun in the suspect's hand, they shot him twice and stopped him from doing anything else. And that suspect is now in custody, but I'm told there are multiple fatalities, and those fatalities may in fact be just from this person driving into people on the bike path and not from him shooting anyone. But again, obviously still very much under investigation, Neil.
But if you're right, are you saying that he started this much further up north on Manhattan, if you're talking about in the 40s
Yeah.
versus this attention we're giving right now to south of 14th Street?
It's not clear if there are any injured people in the 40s, but I'm being told that this person got on the highway in the 40s, on the West Side Highway, got onto the bike path somewhere in the 40s, got off the bike path, went further south and got back on that bike path again. And that's where apparently the bulk of these people were injured and potentially killed. And then the suspect was stopped by someone in a school bus who cut him off and caused that accident. And then that led to the suspect being shot and taken into custody.
Yeah, one of the other reports to that point say that the car just ran over two people, crashed into a school bus. The two people run over appeared immediately dead. And again, we're getting this from different sources, but it does kind of confirm your timeline. Thank you, buddy. I know you're getting a lot more information from a lot of other folks. David Lee Miller on the scene with us right now, downtown New York. David Lee, what can you tell us?
Neil, we're at the intersection of Greenwich and Chambers. We are about 1 block away from where this incident unfolded. I've talked to an eyewitness a few moments ago who said he heard as many as 10 gunshots. He could smell the gunfire. With me now is another witness. You're a college student nearby. Tell me what you saw and heard just a short time ago. Did you actually hear the gunfire, see gunfire?
Yeah, when I was in the bridge between the Chambers Street and Stuyvesant Street. So I was on the bridge. I saw a guy who's like had 2 guns on his hand, and he was just running in the middle of the street. And then I heard like 5-6 gunshots, and that time I was down because I didn't know which part the gunshots coming from. So I was scared. And there was like 4 or 5 students more on the bridge. They're all scared. So when I again watched in the street, I saw the guy with the 2 guns. He was in the street. So I guess the cop shot maybe.
Did you see him fire, the man with these 2 guns?
I didn't see him shooting someone, but he was in the guns with the hand, but he was running around like he was like this, but he didn't shot anyone. I didn't see that part.
Gun in each hand.
Yeah, he had 2 guns.
And what happened to that man?
I saw him after the 5-6 gunshot. I saw him on the ground, and the cops took him, and yeah, the cops were with him.
Police, did you see anyone shot?
No, I didn't see anyone got shot. That
Did you
part.
see where this man came from? Did he come from? I've heard one eyewitness told me he appeared to exit a truck with a Home Depot logo.
Yeah, when I saw the truck was like a hit by something. That time I went there, what happened to see. Then I saw the guys running around. So the students of this Stuyvesant, they told me like the guy came out from the truck.
What's your name?
Tawhid Kabir.
And you're a student nearby.
PMCC.
Thank you for speaking with us. So, Neil, still a great deal of confusion down here. I'm going to let you get a sense of the scene. You can see the fire department still arriving here. The street where it happened still completely sealed off. Authorities are still trying to figure out exactly what happened here. Another eyewitness that I talked to a short time ago said he saw what he believed was at least 1 person who was shot. So far, I've only heard reports that there has been 1 person who is apprehended. This took place near a very high-profile high school in New York, Stuyvesant High School. It is a school with a very good reputation, a school that's very difficult to get admittance to. You have to pass a test. And what happened here took place near this high school. As of now, it does not appear to be connected or linked to this high school. But again, this is an investigation that is still in progress. Neil?
David Lee, have you heard any reports of this guy once he was apprehended that he was shouting? No one knows what he was shouting, but he was just indiscriminately shouting at anyone and everyone, presumably even after he was shot. Do we know anything about that?
I have not heard that. One of the witnesses I talked to said that the individual who had the guns that was apprehended was described as a heavy-set man. The gentleman I was just talking to said that many people like himself thought that he may have been taking part in some type of a Halloween prank. We now know that that is not the case, but what, if anything, he has said so far, we do not have any word of that. Neil?
All right, thank you, David Lee. By the way, the New York Times is reporting, they have reporters on the scene as well, that officials there are saying as many as 6 people might have been killed and 11 injured. The New York Times, this is coming from the New York Times. I've not seen that count so high in any other source. But again, it's anyone's guess. There's just so much we don't know about this. To Dan Bongino, the former U.S. Secret Service agent, former NYPD officer on the phone. Dan, we're trying to ascertain the exact timing of events here because it was thought this was exclusively all downtown when, in fact, this driver, this shooter, might have been, creating some bedlam some blocks north, way up toward virtually Midtown, or at least the Midtown West Side Highway. For those who are unfamiliar with New York City, West Side Highway connects the north and southern parts of Manhattan along, as I say, the West Side Highway, the Hudson River. What do you make of what you're hearing here?
Yeah, that's a key fact to determine if that happened, because there's quite a distance for those New Yorkers out there, former New Yorkers like me, between the 40s, where there now are some reports where this initially happened, where this truck entered onto the bike path, and downtown, Houston and Chambers. That's especially at this time of day. That's not we're talking about a good area there. That area that may have been covered. Now, the key point, the takeaway would be, although obviously motive right now is still up in the air, nobody knows why exactly this happened. I mean, we could speculate till tomorrow morning or when we find out, but I don't think there's any question at this point it was deliberate. If this person did enter in the 40s and then re-entered back downtown Manhattan near Stuyvesant, near the World Trade Center complex, that is way too long of a distance to say, oh, well, this was some kind of an accident. This is clearly some kind of a deliberate act. Motivation's up in the air still.
Yeah, we should get from various sources now that the New York Times, a local NBC affiliate, a host of others are saying up to 6 are feared dead right now, at least a dozen injured. Again, this is a throng of people along these bike paths and elsewhere where, this guy apparently jumped the road, got into the path, plowed through these people. If this seems familiar, we saw something play out. A lot of this in East France, of course, where a driver plowed through crowds who were enjoying a nice spring night. That was in France. Then we've seen this play out in a host of locales, some by just crazy, not having nothing to do with terror, others with clear terror intentions. We do know that this driver, even when he was getting out of his vehicle, was shouting, was yelling, was screaming. A number of witnesses reported that. They just didn't understand what he was saying, whether that means he was not speaking English or they just couldn't understand him, period. What does that tell you?
Yeah, I mean, listen, this is all pointing in a direction, our worst fears. Obviously, it looks like terrorism. I mean, that's speculation, but of course, it meets a pattern of what we've seen in the past in major cities around the world. And another tidbit that came out recently, Neil, was that the rental car, obviously it's a rental truck, I should say, from Home Depot. This again fits the pattern, a similar pattern in the past of these terrorists. Now, why would they do that? Well, vehicle purchasing obviously costs money, takes a lot of time, and leaves a paper trail. So if you need a big car to impact maximum damage upon people, which these sick people do, you go out and you rent a truck, which is obviously heavier and bigger, and you don't leave as big of a paper trail in the end or any suspicion. So, that's the fact pattern here is certainly not a good one. And again, that distance from the 40s down to Houston, this is obviously not an accident. This is some deliberate act here. The intention was to maim and kill as many people as possible.
Also, now we're getting reports here that, and because it's reported so wildly differently, I have some pause just even repeating it, but that he might have been wearing something. Of course, this is Halloween. They're getting ready for the annual Halloween parade in downtown New York, which is quite the event. Tens of thousands are drawn to that, not only those who march, but those who watch. And of course, we're only days away from the New York City Marathon on Sunday. So big crowds expected and descending in lower Manhattan, throughout Manhattan, I should say. The race itself, the marathon itself, is through all 5 boroughs of the greater New York City area. But timing, as they say, is everything. Would that have played a part in this, you think?
Oh yeah, I mean, the goal of terrorists, terrorism is to cause terror, and the way to cause terror is to get media eyeballs in front of the maximum amount of carnage you can possibly get. Now, those reports you addressed in the beginning about him potentially wearing something that, we'll see about that too, but we've seen that in the past in prior attacks. Neil, we've seen it repeatedly where the attackers exit the vehicle with weapons and they have fake suicide vests on. We don't know if that happened here, but it's happened in the past, and that's because they don't want the police to engage right away, and they want to be able to fire on people. So it certainly wouldn't be unprecedented to do something like that. We've seen that tactic before.
All right, Dan, we're getting some updates from our Rick Leventhal. Rick, what can you tell us?
This is new information, Neil, from a member of the Joint Terrorism Task Force who tells me that, in fact, they believe this man, when he got out of the pickup truck, yelled Allah Akbar, which is Arabic for God is great. That he had 2 weapons, but one of them was apparently a paintball gun, and the other one may have been a BB gun. Now, he may have fired rounds from one or both of those weapons, but I'm being told at this point, preliminarily, they don't appear to be anything more than a paintball gun and a BB gun, but he was waving them in a menacing manner, and the NYPD did, in fact, shoot him twice. He is expected to survive. I'm told that he did, in fact, drive down the bike lane for 8 blocks before a guy in a school bus cut him off and caused the accident that brought him to a stop. There may have been as many as 11 injured on that school bus when the driver tried to stop this guy from hitting anyone else. And I'm also being told, Neil, that there are 4 DOAs and many more injured as a result of this person driving down the bike path before being stopped by a school bus in an accident, getting out, waving a couple of weapons that were apparently a paintball gun and a BB gun before officers shot him and took him into custody.
And it was before he was shot that he was reportedly shouting Allah Akbar.
Correct.
Which God is great.
After the accident, he got out of the vehicle, was running around with the weapons in his hand, yelling. and that's when officers shot him.
All right. Thank you very, very much. Ron Hosko joining us right now, the former FBI Assistant Director, on the phone. This is a theme we've seen play out before. Ron, what do you think?
Again and again, Neil, and I think based on what we've seen playing out across Europe, we've seen some hints of it here at, I think it was at Ohio State, in Columbus, where we had a guy jump the curb and try to run people down and come out with a knife. In this era of ISIS-inspired terror, I think the FBI will be looking at this as terrorism until proven otherwise. I've already seen some of their the raid jackets on the scene. Look, it could turn out that it is somebody committing a street crime and decided this was my path to flee the scene, and just his goal was to simply get away from a crime, and it's nothing that's related to terrorism. However, with the background that we face in America and the background that we face in the world today, I think they have to look at it as terrorism until proven otherwise.
What would confirm it? A lot of people say, Neil, be careful, just because someone is shouting Allah Akbar doesn't mean it's a terrorist act, but it certainly begins to take on the look and feel of one. What we do know is the New York mayor, Bill de Blasio, has said it is contained right now. The active shooter contained, but that doesn't mean they're still not looking for possible accomplices, right?
Yeah, they would always be looking for accomplices. They will be, probably as we are speaking, they have an identity on this person. They're getting people to his residence. They're getting access to his devices. One of the things that terrorists aren't necessarily looking to do is cover their tracks. They're looking to say, I'm affiliated with a group. This is me. I'm serious about it. And so I would think that between the Joint Terrorism Task Force and NYPD, they will have a pretty good sense of this within a couple of hours at the most.
We are going to be hearing from New York Police Department officials in about 45 minutes, could be sooner, but they are confirming as well that several people are dead. Up to, again, these are separate reports we're getting. The New York Times and others reporting at least 6 dead. We cannot confirm that, so we go by the NYPD. It just says several people dead after a vehicle drove into a bike path near the World Trade Center site, of course, home of the Freedom Tower and so much more, and what has become a booming downtown, ironically, after that tragedy better than 16 years ago. But a reminder that terror is still a big, big worry, a big concern, and a lot of people certainly worried about that. Buck Sexton, the former NYPD intelligence officer, in just the minutes between our last chatting, Buck, we're getting more indications that this could be a terrorist act, and the shooter obviously shouting Allah Akbar, God is great, continues the theme we've seen, sadly, in so many cities, whether it was in Nice, France, in Belgium, in London, in Paris, in so many cities across the globe where this kind of thing has played out almost exactly. What do you make of this?
The probability that this is a terrorist attack is going up with every minute right now, and with each additional report. The thing that separates what would be a mass casualty incident like this from being rightly described as terrorism is the motive. We know that this was an act, we're overwhelmingly certain, I would say, that this is an act of is a deliberate murder. This is somebody that was trying to engage in a mass casualty incident. We know that there are fatalities now based on what the NYPD has told the press. The issues that remain unresolved, the questions that we still have to do with why would somebody do this? And then you look at similarities and patterns. And so an individual getting a large, heavy vehicle like this and also yelling Allahu Akbar, if in fact that report is true, I haven't seen that confirmed yet, but if that is the case, then you just look at the pattern, you look at the similarity, and there is a direct link that you would draw between mass casualty vehicle attacks in Europe and what we've just experienced here in New York City, whether it's Nice or in Berlin, or there's a number of cities that have suffered incidents similar to this. And the fact that he carried some additional weaponry just to add to the terror effect of this. I mean, if it is true, again, that he was carrying a paintball gun and a BB gun, clearly he was trying to just get more attention for himself and create a greater frenzy around the initial incident after he had left the vehicle. But this does look right now, that, again, it's a question of probability, Neil, not certainty, but this looks very likely to be a terrorist incident, and it's just a question of making sure that the reports we have right now are verified and that we have a sense of the motive. Now, motive is always, in the early stages like this, you're balancing out different competing theories. There have been incidents where there was a mass casualty attack with a car that were just, they decided it was an individual who had some form of mental illness or just lost it, essentially. In this case, given that he yelled Allahu Akbar, given that it was a truck, that he rented it, very deliberate, probability of terrorism, as I said, going up with every minute and with every corroborated report.
You know, we're also about getting an indication here that it was relatively easy for this guy to do what he did. Downtown New York, there are not quite the large partitions and concrete blocks that there are, for example, in Times Square. A lot of those were added in Times Square after Richard Rojas of the Bronx had jumped a city sidewalk, killed one person, injured 22 others. So they took the precaution of literally blocking off as much of Times Square, certainly the sidewalks, to vehicular traffic. You can still obviously get around down there, and they do block off a couple of streets, I think from 40, memory serves me well, 47 to 45th. But in this case, it's a lot more open, and there isn't the blockage that there are elsewhere. But short of just, you know, blocking every single sidewalk, how do you defend yourself against something like that?
This kind of attack is very difficult to thwart once it's operational, Neil. And as long as you're, forget even living in a free society, just a society where people are able to function and move around and drive vehicles, there's always going to be the possibility that the threat of this kind of attack. And that's what makes it, for terrorists, such a useful tactic. There's a reason that we've seen a spike in these kinds of incidents. It's because I think that some of the major groups, again, it's not confirmed yet that it's terrorism, but if we're looking at similarities, some of the major jihadist groups around the globe, Al-Qaeda, the Islamic State, have understood that very complicated, involve training, that involve a lot of coordination, are in fact often easier to thwart, especially when someone does not have that prior training. Whereas if an individual radicalizes, perhaps even radicalizes in secret, anyone can get a vehicle, Neil. Anyone can mow down people who are on bicycles or pedestrians on the street. And so it really it increases the perception that we have that terrorism could happen at any time, at any place, and anyone could engage in it, which just adds to the psychological impact, which is exactly what our enemies want. Again, assuming that this is terrorism, which is a better than 50-50 proposition at this point.
Yeah, it is looking increasingly like that, Buck. Again, just to update you, and this is from the AP confirming earlier reports, law enforcement officials saying now 6 people are dead, 15 hurt after this vehicle drove onto a bike path near the World Trade Center site. Now, this, of course, you could see is prompting a good deal of crowds just trying to find out what the heck is going on. A big Halloween parade was due to start, I think, a couple of hours from now, if not sooner. Whether that parade is still on is anyone's guess here, but it attracts quite a few crowds, not only those marching in it, but those watching it. Tens of thousands descend on Lower Manhattan for that event. Of course, this is the weekend, of course, of the New York City Marathon as well. But much of downtown New York gone to a halt right now. Much of the West Side Highway, a major artery for people getting in and out of Manhattan, has been all but shut down. Bill Stanton, a former New York police officer, with us right now. Bill, what do you make of this?
Well, Neil, you know, you said something earlier today that should never be forgotten, is that the loss of life, no matter what the reason, the friends and families who are injured and the people who are deceased, you know, it really doesn't make a difference what we're labeling it. Now, what is actually happening? Is it a road rage gone mad, or is it an act of terrorism? I will tell you this, from what I'm watching and looking at all the resource of the NYPD, the FBI, I doubt it's an organized terrorist attack. Because if it were, now if I were planning a terrorist act, I'd be on the other side of town because all my resources are now here investigating this one person. So might this person have had radicalized leanings and it be a combination of road rage, you know, mental deficiency and terrorism? Maybe. To me, this doesn't feel like an organized terrorist quote. You know, to put it in simpler terms, if nothing else, you know, the numbers are too low
for an organized, fortunately for New Yorkers and everyone, the numbers are too low, because if it was really thought out and really planned, the numbers would be a lot higher than what we have here. Thank God.
But it could be just one guy in a vehicle plowing down people. We're told the 6 deaths were people who were run over, not shot. So what do you make of that?
Well, I mean, there's not a lot of facts that are coming out yet. I'm interested to hear what the witnesses saw and heard. Was it precipitated by being cut off, or did this person have every intention of doing this? I mean, once they get into his social media, once they get into his PC, and they gather all that, if there was planning behind it, it would be interesting to see. I'm leaning towards, and this is a guess, I'm leaning towards this was a man who snapped and just may have had certain leanings, in one area, whether it be radicalized Muslim or whatever. I'm thinking this was an act that just occurred. It was not pre-planned. That is my guess. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong.
Well, just you shouting Allah Allah Akbar does not make it a terrorist act. To your point, no one has confirmed that it was a terrorist act, just that it has the underpinnings of looking like one. But thank you very, very much. Ken Langone is here, of course, the man who came up with Home Depot. Sadly, today, a reminder, because the vehicle used here was a Home Depot truck. I'm sure that just makes Ken recoil. But what do you make of all of this? And here we are, downtown New York, not too far from the neck of the woods, of course, that unleashed horror some 16 years ago.
Well, I'm sure I speak for everybody at Home Depot when I say how badly we feel that it was one of our vehicles that was legitimately rented from us. We have that service where people can rent a vehicle to carry things home. It's part of our business. But I think, Neil, this proves for sure danger's all around us. And I'm sorry, I don't care whether it's organized terrorism or one nut who buys into this insanity. We have to be on our guard all the time. If nothing proves to me more than this experience, that we need to know who's here with us. How the hell can we just say, come on in, and we don't care how you got in here, and we don't care where you're from or what you did or what your background was. And I'm not arguing pro or against immigration. My grandparents came here as immigrants. I think virtually everybody's ancestors came here as immigrants. We're a country of immigrants. But they all came legitimately, and they all came that we all knew where they come from, who they were, and what they wanted to do.
We don't even know anything about this particular guy's ethnicity. Do we have to? I heard New York could be like a fortress in Manhattan then, all of a sudden. You know what Times Square is like now. Now they're saying, looking at this, well, maybe this was too exposed, too easy to jump
Neil,
the
we're a free society.
Yeah.
We won't stand to have our lives so restricted. Unfortunately, this is a tragedy. But I don't care whether it's an organized effort or one guy on his own. People lost their lives, and it's a form of terrorism one way or the other.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And I believe that this underscores the need for us to be diligent and have a program and have an effort where people have to let us know who they are and that they come in here legitimately. Why have borders otherwise?
Yeah.
I don't understand this.
But this guy,
and this is not me.
This guy was a homegrown American, and nothing would have telegraphed that.
Well, look, there's nuts in the world.
Yeah.
We had the mass murderers. Remember Kaczynski, the guy that was, the Unabomber?
The Unabomber.
We have enough screwballs in America without important. And the point is, we don't know anything about this case right now. But certainly it would seem to me that what he screamed out would indicate that he was sympathetic to the terrorist.
Let me, but by the way, we're understanding now that the President of the United States has been briefed on these developments in Lower Manhattan here. What is increasingly, although not officially calling it as such, a terror incident where the person involved, after using a Home Depot truck that he rented legitimately, rammed onto what was a bicycle path and plowed down a number of people. Most, indeed, not all of the 6 killed, and at least 15 injured, came as a result of that. He then came out of that vehicle brandishing what appeared to be guns, but now we're told they might have been fake guns. Nevertheless, he was shot, apprehended, but not before shouting Allah Allah Akbar, which is getting back to this notion whether it was a terrorist incident. Again, it might not matter at this time because much of Lower Manhattan is effectively shut down. The West Side Highway, a major artery that gets you to and from Manhattan, all but shut down all the way now, potentially up to the 40s, which is parallel to Midtown downtown Manhattan. But Ken Langone, you know, knowing this and knowing this area and this neck of the woods and what people are exposed to, big Halloween parade tonight, a big New York City marathon this week.
It's sad. It affects our way of life. It affects the things we take for granted as being American, being in America, whether it's the Halloween parade or whether it's the marathon on Sunday, whatever it is. This is a fact of life. This is the world we live in today.
We have a view in this country, and Chris, that's generally not us. Despite the 9/11 experience, despite the Boston Marathon incident, we tend to think it's more abroad than it's here, but it's here as well, isn't it?
It's all over the world. It's all over the world.
What do you do?
You do the best you can to make sure you take every precaution possible. And I come back again, and believe me, this is not a political argument. This is my belief. We ought to know who's coming to America. We ought to know something about their background, like we do with all legitimate immigrants. And this argument that we should look the other way with illegitimate immigration is nuts. It's nuts. Let's do away with the border guards. Let's do away with the points of entry all over the United. Let's not have people at Kennedy Airport wait in line to come through customs. That's what it all says.
What do you think about those who are going to see this incident? They were thinking of coming in to watch the marathon this weekend, have not running it, or to go to the Halloween parade, if that is even still on. I haven't heard that it's being canceled, guys. Maybe you can find out. But that was supposed to happen tonight. That's a big event. But people, as you know, can get anxious.
Look, and that's natural and that's understandable. I would hope that we don't allow these people to win by default, that they so frighten us that they affect things we take for granted and a way of life in America. We take for granted that I can get in my car and drive to a movie house. So we take for granted I can take my grandkids down to watch the Halloween parade or the New York Marathon. I pray to God that we don't get so paralyzed by these acts of whatever you want to call it, whether it's terrorism or insanity. I pray to God that we don't let this affect our way of life. And that's the thing we all have to worry about.
You know what does come up, whether this ends up being, you know, one lone nut who was inspired as sort of like a lone wolf to pull an act that was ISIS inspired, but we pay so much attention to groups like ISIS that are supposedly on the run over there, but they're alive and well and like cockroaches spreading everywhere, aren't they?
But what? How many billion people on Earth now?
Yeah.
6 billion, 9 billion, 6 billion, I guess it is. If they have 5,000 of them, do the math. You lose it in the rounding, but they're there. We won't accept one death.
Yeah.
We think it's a tragedy if one person broke a leg today, nobody was killed, and somebody got a broken leg, that would bother us. These are our values. And this is the thing we have to think about. People do matter to us. Lives matter to us. Limbs matter to us. Eyesight, all these things matter to us. So we can't take for granted. We can't make any concession. We just have to be on our guard. We live in a dangerous world. What else can you say?
Yeah. I do want to dip in, as Ken was speaking here, we are getting a few more details and some witnesses talking about at least what they saw when all of this went down, again, about an hour and 45 minutes ago. Let's listen in.
So we seen the guy huddle up, a bunch of bicycles, they were on the floor. It was really chaotic.
How many bicycles do you think were on the floor?
A good four bicycles.
Did it surprise you that we're hearing that there are at least 6 fatalities here?
Well, it surprised us because, you know, you usually never see something like this happening around here, especially around here. So, like, we just looked outside the window and they were just laying there, like, dead. And they weren't even covered yet.
What did it sound like when the firing started? Did you hear?
We didn't hear the gunshot. Like, we were just, like, paying attention in class, and this girl just got up. She's like, someone just got shot, and we just ran to the window, and you just see the dead bodies just laying there.
And then they evacuated your school?
No. It took us, like, it took them, like, about half an hour for them to lock in, to have a lockdown.
Okay, so what time was the shooting itself, do you think?
We started class at 3. It had to be like 3:15. Yeah, like literally 15 minutes to the classroom.
I didn't hear any shots. What's your first name?
Shikima.
And what's your last name?
Carter.
Okay. What's your name?
Denise Perez.
Right, thank you so much. Sorry to have to see that.
No, yeah.
All right. right, that is interesting. Some of the eyewitness reports, and this always happens in incidents like these, and it's human nature. People hear and see different things. That young woman said, of course, this seemed to start downtown. Still another witness earlier on. I caught that before we were on the air with a guest here, that it did appear in Midtown Manhattan first. Obviously, there is great confusion here, and that's to be expected. Doesn't mean anyone is right or wrong, because their memory and the event it plays out differently in a lot of people's heads. Ed Mullins is Sergeants Benevolent Association president. He joins us on the phone. Ed, what you're hearing and what you're seeing, reports of at least 6 dead, 9 injured. That count could be higher, and that this was a deliberate act where a lot of the killed were killed when the driver jumped a bike path and ran over them, killed them, and then brandished what appeared to be live weapons, but they might have been fake weapons. He was shot. Screams Allah Akbar. What do you make of all that?
Well, I'm getting the same reports, Neil, from the officers at the scene. He jumped out of the vehicle, yelled Allah Akbar, fired into a crowd of people. I'm also getting confirmation of at least 6 people dead right now. I think it's too early to eliminate any possibility of what this may be. I'm kind of taken back that the mayor is saying and the NYPD is saying it's not terrorism and this was a truck dispute. This has all the makings of terrorism. It's very early on. The FBI is at the scene, and I think we need to really do a thorough investigation and get all the facts. We also have a Halloween parade tonight, and the NYPD is prepared for that. So this could be one event that leads to another event. And I think that right now there's so much taking place that we need to start to digest all this information and learn who this individual is and look into his background to see where this is really going.
All right. Thank you very, very much, my friend. I want to go to Rick Leventhal, might have an update for us right now. Rick, what are you hearing?
Well, just more